Hey, how you guys doing? It's your boy Beasley back at it again with another college football video. So I figured this would be really fun content to try. I don't normally do these IRL stuff. Normally I stick to the game, college football, for my tips and tricks, some other useful little snippets of information I like to give people to kind of better their experience, whether it's an online or offline dynasty. I did a little reaction yesterday of the college football bracket where to say I was very disappointed that Alabama made it would be an understatement. Insert, I have since read, I am recording these on different days. I have since read some of the comments of Bama fans saying that they could have got beat by 1,000 points and they still would have made it, which I find very comical because, yes, the team that struggled against South Carolina, Auburn, Oklahoma, and, played like absolute garbage in the SEC championship game somehow deserved to make it over, BYU, who you could argue also got embarrassed. But that's not the point of this video. Not going to spend too much time on this video ranting about old stuff, but I have read those funny comments, so appreciate you guys for never ceasing to make me laugh. This video, though, is going to be a lot more controversial. This video will be my own picks on who I think will win what. Also, for the record, I will include you guys' picks as well. So if you guys weren't there on my live stream yesterday, the about 25 or so of you guys who were there, appreciate you guys. If you guys don't know, I stream every single day right here on YouTube at around 6 o'clock CST. Whether I'm doing, random rebuild challenges, yapping about sports, politics, what have you. We kind of just spend a lot of time over there yapping while we play football. But either way, yesterday I did my community bracket, so I will show that after my bracket, but I did not sway the voters at all. They voted on who they think or they thought at the time would win. Again, show that momentarily, but this will be my bracket, and yes, I cannot wait to get your pitchforks, get your torches, get your rage. I cannot believe I already cannot wait to read these comments, because if the comments of my previous video were the benchmark to how funny some of those comments could be, I can't wait to read the comments of this video. So, round one will be really simple. I think half of these games are going to be blowouts. They're not going to be close. It's not even going to probably be within 3 or 4 scores. So 2 of these 4 are not really going to matter much, and the other 2 I'm going to break down piece by piece. So let's get right into it, shall we? So, before I get the obligatory comment, oh, that looks trashy. I am not a Photoshop wizard. I am not a Photoshop expert. I struggle to make thumbnails on my YouTube videos. So, do apologize if this is a smidge blurry or not the caliber you thought it was. But here are going to be my matchups for the quarterfinals. Against James Madison versus Oregon, I'm picking Oregon to win. If you're picking James Madison, I think you're a psychopath. I think it's fine to root for James Madison. I also think it's fine to root for Tulane, but you got to call a spade a spade. These are small programs playing big programs. They're going to get slaughtered. And it's not even just an opinion I have. It's what Vegas has. Again, the sport line, I think, was like 22.5 points for, I think, James Madison versus Oregon. And I think Tulane, it was like 17 or 18.5 points. It's not going to be close. So give me Oregon in the round one, which is funny because if you guys know on this channel, I'm a absolute degenerate Oregon hater. I love to make fun of Oregon fans who are, I gotta watch my words here. I like to make fun of Oregon fans who are annoying. That's the correct caveat there. If you're a normal person who likes Oregon, I have no problems with you. But the annoying Oregon fans, I love to make fun of them. And so yeah, the Oregon probably has the easiest playoff bracket you possibly could have because they get a free cupcake off rip, which is funny. Next, we have Alabama versus Oklahoma. And as you guys can see, I picked Oklahoma. I don't really think it matters if I'm being bluntly honest between Alabama or Oklahoma. I think, because they play Indiana in round 2, I really don't think it matters with either of these 2 programs. Oklahoma defense, phenomenal, right? They've already played. Now, albeit when they did play, there was like 5 or 6 fumbles for Alabama and like 1 or 2 interceptions. So like, obviously when you have almost 7 or 8 turnovers, you're going to win the ball game. So that's a bit skewed, but the problem I have with Bama, and I said it in my previous video, I'll say it here. Bama cannot pick up a blitz to save their lives. This has been a reoccurring problem for several weeks now. Basically, if you send more than 4 people at Ty Simpson, he just doesn't work. And if you hit him enough, right? If you pressure him enough, if you touch him, if you get his jersey just a smidge dirty, he will fall apart. He will absolutely go full deer in headlights and just suck. Now, does that mean the Oklahoma offense is like elite? No. I think this is going to be another very miserable, low-scoring ball game that's not going to be very entertaining to watch, kind of like Tulane, Ole Miss, and James Madison. I think 3 of these 4 matchups are very bad to watch. I would be absolutely shocked if the 3 worst viewed games of this whole playoff series was not the first 3 games here. Because 2 of them are cupcakes and 1 of them are 2 offenses that are inept. The only benefit I will give Oklahoma is that even though their defense is amazing, their offense is hit or miss. And the thing about Bama is if they're not getting a first down, right, you can win that game with field goals. Is it going to be a fun game to watch? As I said, no. But give me Oklahoma there. I just think because Bama can't block a blitz, Oklahoma is going to be like, hey, remember when we played a couple weeks ago and we absolutely, hit Ty Simpson like 17 times? Yeah, we're going to do that again and again. And you're going to stop us. Because unlike last time, we're not going to magically stop blitzing. Some teams like Georgia, some teams did it off rip, which is like what you're supposed to do. Whereas teams like Auburn gave them like a quarter and a half. It's like, no, if you just blitzed off rip, you probably would have won that game. But give me Oklahoma. Also, for the record, aside from the James Madison Oregon game and the Tulane Ole Miss game, I know none of the spreads. The only reason why I know those 2 spreads is because the number is so high. I couldn't tell you who's favored to win between Alabama and Oklahoma. I couldn't tell you who's favored to win any of these games. So just in case I get the obligatory, you're picking so-and-so, I have no idea what the spreads are. I don't gamble. I don't do that. So there you go. And then lastly, probably the best game of round 1 by far is going to be Miami, Texas A&M. And this is a really funny matchup to me because you have 2 quarterbacks who suck at quarterbacking, but you have 2 defenses that are really good at playing defense. So there's a potential here that all 4 of these games suck. Now, I'm going to hold out hope that one of these 4 games isn't an absolute stinker. I'm going to hope that I'm not sleeping through the first round of the college football playoff because 2 teams are getting blown out and then 2 teams can't score points. But here's the difference between the Oklahoma-Bama game being boring versus the Miami A&M game being boring. Both of these quarterbacks at Miami and A&M, they love to huck interceptions. The phrase "fuck it and chuck it" is going to be live in this game. I'm expecting Carson Beck to go full Carson Beck, the prime Carson Beck, the Carson Beck we saw versus Louisville, the Carson Beck we saw several times at Georgia. I'm expecting at least 3 interceptions this game. 3 interceptions, hell, maybe even a couple of fumbles sprinkled in there. I'm expecting turnovers galore. That being said, I'm also expecting turnovers galore for A&M's quarterback. I'm blanking on his name right now off the top of my head, but he loves to throw interceptions. He's not very accurate. He's more of a runner than a passer. So you got 2 decent defenses going at each other, and you have 2 quarterbacks who have no ball security whatsoever. This game will be probably similar to Bama and Oklahoma in the total points scored, but how they score those points will be really funny just watching interceptions and fumbles. So give me A&M. Give me the Carson Beck will shrivel up show. Do apologize to all my Miami fans. Shout out you, Charles, but I can't pick Miami in good faith with Carson Beck. I think if Miami had literally any other QB on their roster, if they had Cam Ward, just for a small thing here, if Cam Ward would have waited 1 more year to go out, or if he had like 1 more year of eligibility, I think this Miami team would have been deadly. But because they have Carson bum-ass Beck as their QB, I have 0 faith. So in round 1, I have Oregon winning, Oklahoma winning, Ole Miss winning, and A&M winning, as you guys can see on the screen. So just to make your eyes bleed less from the blurry PNGs, I actually went in and tried to make the semifinals a little more cleaner. So for the quarterfinals, you have Oregon versus Texas Tech. I'm picking Oregon. I have since learned that probably Oregon's not a good pick here. It was brought to my attention that they will be playing down south at this game in Miami, in which that will be literally a coast-to-coast travel for Oregon. But I already picked Oregon, so I'm not going to go back on my word. The original reason why I picked Oregon versus Texas Tech is really simple. It's dogs, right? You got to have good horses in the race to win the horse race. You got to have dogs. You got to have people. And I understand that, this game is not all X's and O's, right? Or I understand this game is not all about Jimmys and Joes. It's also about X's and O's. I completely agree with that. However, Oregon, from what AI says, so take this with a grain of salt, and maybe an Oregon fan can educate me, but from what AI says, approximately 75% of their roster is 4- and 5-star athletes. So the talent disparity between Texas Tech and Oregon will be insane. I understand Texas Tech bought like a whole team in the portal. I understand this is probably the best Texas Tech team they've had in going on probably 30 years. I get that. It's just, at the end of the day, when you got to line up in front of your opponent, if you have inferior players, that will play a role. You could, as a coach, call the correct play. You could have the correct system. You could do everything right on your end as a coach. If your players can't perform, it does not matter. So, I'm picking Oregon here, which is probably shocking because I dog on Oregon all the time, but I think Oregon got an incredibly favorable bracket compared to several other teams in this bracket. So I have Oregon winning the quarterfinal game versus Texas Tech. Then in Oklahoma versus Indiana, this game is going to be very interesting to watch because you have Indiana, who showed versus Ohio State that they don't want to score, basically. If Indiana had the choice, Indiana would win by just ball control offense and kicking field goals. They will score when they have to score, which is fine. You can play like that, but that's also the exact same way Oklahoma plays. Now, mind you, Oklahoma plays that way for a little different reason. Their offense can't score. So whereas one offense chooses not to score, the other offense doesn't have the choice. So this might be a really low-scoring defensive game. And considering, again, I have more faith in the Indiana offense than the Oklahoma offense. Both defenses are about the same, if I'm being honest. I think Oklahoma's defense is very good. I think Indiana's defense is pretty good. So defenses are kind of a wash to me. This is going to come down to basically QB/playmakers making plays and kickers hitting kicks. So under that notion, Oklahoma does have a better kicker. Oklahoma has probably as good of a defense. It's just their offense is inferior. So if Oklahoma were to win this game, I wouldn't be shocked. But I think it's like a 60-40 split to me. I think Indiana just barely edges them out. Again, expect a low-scoring game here, and you'll have Indiana moving on to the semifinals. On our third matchup, we get another SEC rematch. We got Georgia versus Ole Miss. I'm picking Georgia. This really shouldn't, honestly, if there were to be an upset this college football playoff, it would be Tulane upsetting Ole Miss strictly because they don't have a coach, right? Ole Miss, I don't think, has that great of a roster in general. I think Lane Kiffin did very well with the players he had on that roster, and Lane Kiffin's not there no more. So I expect Ole Miss to, they should blow out Tulane, right? Keyword being should. But if there were some, witch magic to occur, I think Tulane, without a coachless Ole Miss team could maybe score an upset. But I don't think it really matters, if I'm being honest, between Tulane and Ole Miss. I think both of them just get massacred by Georgia. I think if Georgia plays Tulane, if they can squeak that game out, I think Georgia wins by 35 points. If Ole Miss beats Tulane, which I think is going to happen, I'm still picking Georgia here. Yeah, I know they played earlier in the year, but again, they had a head coach then. They have no head coach now. So give me Georgia. Plus, Gunnar Stockton is looking pretty beastly right now. Georgia's defense in general is looking pretty good. So I just feel like, again, Oregon got a very favorable bracket. I think Georgia also got a very favorable bracket. Who didn't get a favorable bracket, though, would be, as you can see, the Ohio State at number 2. So, of all the teams, Miami, Texas A&M is unequivocally the best 2 teams of any first round there was. Then following it into the quarterfinals, you got Ohio State versus A&M. I do think of all of the opponents here, I think A&M's probably the best one. So, poor old Ohio State has to play probably the best team there is, but I think they're going to kick the crap out of them. I think this Ohio State defense is going to make that QB who hucks and fumbles and has a bunch of turnovers. I think he will have a bunch of turnovers here. I ultimately think Ohio State will be just fine on offense. I think they will have, if I'm being generous, maybe Julian Sayin has 1 fumble or 1 interception, right? But I think generally speaking, they're going to have better time of possession. They're going to have the turnover battle. I think Ohio State will win more facets of the game than A&M. And so I'm going to pick Ohio State for the quarterfinals. That is, in conclusion, going to the semis would be Oregon, Indiana, Georgia, and Ohio State. To determine the natty, you have Oregon versus Indiana. I'm taking Indiana. I think up to this point, Oregon was able to skate by with borderline cupcakes and or just beating people with better talent. I don't think that's going to work against Indiana. I think Indiana is going to be like, LOL, you're funny. We're just as good as you. So, no. So, give me Indiana to make the natty. Insert joke here about me calling them frauds. I know. We'll cover that momentarily. And then on the southern half of the bracket, it's Georgia versus Ohio State. I think this will probably be the best game the entire time. I think if you include the first round, second round, third round, and the finals, the 4th round, I think Georgia versus Ohio State is going to be must-see TV. If this is not the 7 o'clock header game, I will be shocked because you have the premier brand in the SEC right now being Georgia, playing the premier Big Ten brand being Ohio State. This will be a phenomenal game, and I'm going to give it to the Ohio State University. I think Ohio State is going to murder Texas A&M from being very angry that they lost against Indiana the previous game they last played. And I think this game they are also going to try to murder Georgia. I don't think they will, but they will try to murder Georgia considering the last time they played. Stroud should have won, or was that Justin Fields? I actually forget which QB that was, but either way, last time Georgia, Ohio State locked up, Ohio State should have won. I believe their kicker shanked a 40-yard kick, or maybe it was a bit longer. My memory's a bit fuzzy, but either way, last two times these two teams locked up, Ohio State should have won, and they could have won, but they didn't because their kicker missed a kick. Where has that? Where we heard that story before? But yeah, for your natties, I have Indiana beating Oregon, finally putting them in their place of just not playing nobody, and then I have Ohio State beating Georgia, getting their get back. So again, if you follow my bracket and the events occur that are in my bracket, up to this point, Ohio State has had Georgia and A&M in their side versus Indiana having the lethargic Oklahoma and then Oregon who plays cupcakes. This is kind of a completely different bracket of like, I know they're both 1 and 2, but one had a much difficult journey getting here versus the other one. My 2026 or 2025/2026 national championship team is the Ohio State University. If you were a longtime supporter of this channel, whether you watch my live streams or whatnot, I always talk about the Ohio State University. No, I'm not a Buckeye fan, but I do know a lot of them are in my community, and I do watch all their games. I think the Buckeyes are going to murder Indiana. I don't think this game will be close. I think this will be one of those games where Indiana kind of got away with just playing inferior talent the entire time. Again, Oklahoma doesn't really have an offense. And then Oregon, kind of the same thing. It's like Oregon, yeah, they're flashy, but like when we're equal, you're not very good. Plus, Indiana's already beat Oregon, so there you go. I just think going into this game, Indiana will not game plan properly. I think going into this rematch for the Natty, I don't know if it would be a Signetti issue or if it would just be a player issue, but I just don't think they would take this game as seriously as they took the Big Ten championship. And considering their schedule getting here was significantly easier, I think they're going to try to not half-ass it, but we all know what I'm talking about here. Whether you're watching college football, whether you're watching the NFL, there's always that team that has a basically easy coast ride, a free joy ride all the way there. Then they get there and they get belt ass, kind of like the Chiefs a couple years ago, right? Or actually, you could use the Chiefs twice there between the Bucks and the Eagles. Anyways, you get the point though. Versus Ohio State, who's basically been in full tilt mode the entire time, right? They had to play Georgia and A&M, two very good SEC schools, and they beat them both. The best analogy I can give you is that Ohio State is basically in killer mode. They had to be in killer mode since the beginning of the playoff with A&M and Georgia. So I think going into this game, my prediction is that Indiana will kind of slack off. They'll kind of not take this as seriously as they should, which will then lead to just a sloppy beginning for them. And Ohio State is going to come out of the gate wanting to rip their heads off. I am expecting this game to be very similar to the Notre Dame game last year. If you remember going into that game, there were, I don't want to call them a small amount of people, but there was a large amount of people going into the Notre Dame game last year that was saying that Ohio State couldn't keep up, which was funny because I'm like, did you watch their games? Like, LOL. And basically from jump, Ohio State was just the better team. Ohio State was like, yeah, we're gonna just beat the hell out of you, and you can't stop me. I know in that Notre Dame game, they scored some garbage time touchdowns to make the scoreboard look a little close, but that game was a 30-point blowout. Ohio State was comfortably winning the entire time. At no point was Ohio State ever threatened by Notre Dame at all. They weren't. And I have a feeling this will play out the exact same way. My prediction is that Indiana will lose to Ohio State, and Ohio State will be back-to-back champions, which, I mean, again, if you watch this video or these, my content, I've been riding with Ohio State all year. They were my preseason pick to win it all, so of course I was going to do that. So there you go. That is my bracket. And now let's go hop in your bracket. Let's go hop in the community bracket. Let me know down below what you agree or disagree with my bracket, and let's go see what you guys did, because again, I had zero impact of this. I went into the stream. I put a bunch of polls up. You guys vote on the polls. This has nothing to do with me. This is 100% my community. So I do apologize. This was a screenshot from the stream. It was not as pretty as the one I made. I do apologize, but we are going to quickly cover this because we had some agreeances and some disagreeances. For example, we pretty much agreed on the entire bottom bracket. My chat picked A&M to beat Miami. I agree. My chat also picked Ohio State to beat A&M. I agree. Chat picked Ole Miss to beat Tulane. Thank you, guys. Chat also picked Georgia to beat Ole Miss. Pretty much the entire bottom half of this bracket is identical to my bracket. Up here, they picked Oregon to beat Madison. But the big shocker is I didn't realize I had this many amount of Alabama fans in my chat. Bama beat Oklahoma by, I think, 13 or 14%. It was a pretty wide margin, or maybe it was like 20%. It was 60-40. I forget. But Bama beat Oklahoma by a wide margin. Oh, speaking of funny numbers, Texas A&M also got clean swept by Ohio State. I believe the 16 or 17 votes that got picked for this game, all of them were Ohio State. It was a clean sweep. It was the only clean sweep we had the entire bracket. Not a single vote went for A&M, which is kind of funny. But yeah, Bama was chosen over Oklahoma, which is interesting. I definitely disagree with that. I think Oklahoma wins that game. Not, by a wide margin, but I do think they win. But pretty much everything has stayed the same up to this point. Then in round 2, going into the semifinals, I picked Oregon to beat Texas Tech. Chat picked Texas Tech to win, which I think is interesting. Bama versus Indiana, they picked Indiana to win, which, again, I don't disagree with. Honestly, even though we got here differently, I do kind of agree with the outcome being Indiana wins regardless. So, no harm, no foul. Covered this game. So, pretty much the only difference between my bracket and Chat's bracket, or my community bracket, is I put Oregon in over Texas Tech, but they put, obviously, Texas Tech in. So, that's pretty much the only change. Indiana wins that one. I also agree. I think whether it's Oregon or Texas Tech, Indiana just wins that matchup. And then they also picked Ohio State versus Georgia. Also, shout out to the Georgia fans in my chat because this game was this poll was, I think, decided by one vote. It was like 1 or 2 votes. It was a crazy close vote, which Georgia versus Ohio State. Then in the finals, just like my prediction, you guys chose Indiana versus Ohio State, in which Ohio State, I think, won by like 17%. Ohio State comfortably won that final vote. And so this was the community bracket. Be sure to tune in every single day on my YouTube channel. I try to stream or do some sort of live content, some amount of time for you guys. This is going to be a long video of me yapping. Let me know who you think down below, what games you think I got wrong, what games you think I got right, and who you think overall will win the national championship. And please, for the love of God, don't leave a comment saying, LOL, you're wrong, and not specify why I'm wrong. Or don't, I am perfectly fine with people agreeing or disagreeing with me. It's just the dumbest comments I read is the obligatory, you're wrong. And it's like 2 words. That's it. That's all you're going to give me is I'm wrong. That's it. No, in-depth breakdown or no reason. Just LOL, you're wrong. But yeah, guys, as always, I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, night, afternoon, or day, depending on whatever time you watch my content in the future. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, give me a follow, or sub on Twitch. I'd greatly appreciate that. And if you can, please become a member. Members support the channel a ton. You get early access to all my content and much, much more. So yeah, guys, I will see you in the next one. Deuces.